subject that's very important to me. It's learning. I've been working in learning and education my entire career. I started as a high school teacher in the U.S., where I'm from, and now I work at GlobalEnglish, where we provide business English training to people all over the world. And the reason I'm so passionate about learning is it is, I think, perhaps the most critical and truly unique thing that we do as a species. It is our gift. Learning in all the forms, whether we're talking about teaching or reading, knowledge creation of any kind, is a gift that we make to others. Essentially, we're saying, when I share my knowledge with you, I'm giving you something of immense value, perhaps my most precious resource, knowledge. I'm sharing my knowledge with you. Knowledge, that's our unique ability to interpret the world. And learning, our unique ability to share those discoveries. You will find knowledge and learning at the heart of all of our triumphs as a species. They're the cornerstone of our success. You look back through time and you find that knowledge and learning are the things that carried us forward. And today, we've heard this throughout the day, the world is changing. Not a surprise. Technology is everywhere. Watch out, it's coming for us. It is true. The world is changing. But if we stick with the principles of knowledge and learning, we will not only survive, we will thrive in this future. So I told you I was a history teacher in the past, or a high school teacher. I taught history. So I'm going to give us an example. I don't know if my animations are working. We'll see. Oh, yes, close enough. It goes back to the 5th century in Europe. There was this great cataclysmic event in Europe in the 5th century. The Roman Empire collapsed. And the Roman Empire in its heyday was this pretty powerful thing. And controlled huge swaths of Europe and Asia, consumed immense, vast quantities of knowledge. In fact, it was its ability to consume knowledge that gave it its power. As it moved across the world, it came across all of this different information and it sucked it up. That's why the Roman gods and the Greek gods in the pantheon are so similar. The Romans stole them. They stole the Greek version. And that's how they created their pantheon. See, they absorbed knowledge. Knowledge was the heart of their power. And when the Roman Empire fell, it was a cataclysm. In fact, it was so dramatic, we actually sometimes call it the Dark Ages, this period when knowledge seemed to end in Europe. Population declined, literacy evaporated. Thousands of years of human knowledge were lost. People toiled for generations in the feudal system. And then, a spark, a change, a renaissance. The Renaissance. It means rebirth. This is from the Sistine Chapel. It's a work of art from that time period. You see, in the Renaissance, what happened was people began to rediscover the past. So if the collapse of Rome brought the end of knowledge, the darkness, it was the Renaissance, the rebirth, that brought the rediscovery. It was knowledge and learning that once again fueled the growth of society in Europe. This is important, right? This is a change. Knowledge and learning. Knowledge and learning. Okay, so I am from Silicon Valley, San Francisco. There's a word, I've heard it already today. We like to use it, disruptor. Does anybody know what a disruptor is, or a disruptor? It means something that's like radically changing the world. And usually when we're in Silicon Valley, we usually mean like an app or something I can sell you, like Spotify is disrupting music, or Uber is disrupting taxis. Honestly, I'm very skeptical of disruptive technologies. I think it's a lot of hype. It's something we tell investors to get money. But I actually do know that there are disruptive technologies in the world because one of them happened in this time period. In fact, it's one of the reasons that the Renaissance was successful. Does anybody know what that was? It's the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg introduced the printing press to Europe in the 15th century. You see, before the printing press, the way that you produced books in that Dark Age, that Middle Ages, is that you wrote them by hand. There were monks, religious figures who would be in scriptorium, and they'd spend all day copying books. They could do 2 to 4 pages an hour. And they were very rare, right? You might see these in museums if you ever travel around. You might see, they're called illuminated text. They can have lots of fancy drawings in them because they're so unusual and rare. And because they were so unusual and rare, so was knowledge. The access to knowledge was limited. The Gutenberg press transformed that. It went from 2 pages to 25 pages in an hour. Suddenly, the spread of information was faster and easier than ever before. It was critical to the transformation of society. So I am a disruptor skeptic, but I am certain that there are real disruptive technologies, like the printing press. I'm also certain that we live in a transformative time. This is a time of great change. Technology is transforming every facet of our life. And I am absolutely certain that it is our commitment to knowledge and learning that will once again pave the path forward, just as it has in the past. You've heard this term before, information age. It's an oldie. We've been using this forever. In fact, it's such an old term. It's kind of a cliche. We forget how much technology and information has changed over the years. But this is why I think we're in a new renaissance. Let's take a second to travel back into the distant past known as the 90s. 1998, we sent 246 million emails a day. It's not a small number. We send that same number every 75 seconds today. It's 281 billion emails a day. That's a lot of information shared. How about this one? In 1996, there was the first social network. It was called 6 Degrees. It lasted about a year and had about 1 million members. And today, my animation would show this incredible display of social media, 3 billion users. 3 billion users and countless social media players. In fact, social media is such an integral part of the learning experience, we can't really think of the internet without it. Or one more thing, how about this? Mobile phones, 1999, 2 years ago, just over 20 years ago, 8 people out of every 100 had a mobile phone subscription. Today, there are more mobile phone subscriptions than there are people on the earth. Somebody's hogging them all. There's 65% of the world's population has mobile phone service. It's about 5 billion people. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of access to information. But it's an important distinction I want to make here. Information is not the same thing as knowledge. Information are building blocks. It's things. It's pieces of information it's like puzzle pieces. Knowledge is the thing that we construct from that information. It's the way we combine it together. Information are facts and figures, dates, historical dates, and things like that. Knowledge is the story we tell from the facts. It's the analysis we make from the data. And this distinction is critical. You see, in the Middle Ages, it wasn't just the printing press that transformed society. It was also other changes that gave people the opportunity to think. Improved diets, the development of schools, the rise of the middle class. This gave people time to process information and create knowledge, because information is not the same thing as knowledge. But if the printing press opened a river of information, the internet has opened a flood. It's an ocean. We did 2 pages in the Middle Ages. We did 25 pages after Gutenberg. Today, we do about 70 new articles on Wikipedia every hour. 70 articles on Wikipedia every hour. That's a lot of information. In fact, we have a name for that. We call it information overload. That means more information than we can process. It's a real thing. The research from Bassick says it cost the US economy $1 trillion. That's a lot of information. How do you do that? How do you cause $1 trillion? Well, you do things like send 281 billion emails. Now, some of those emails are spam, maybe all of them, feels like it anyway. But actually, some percentage of that email requires response. Some human has communicated with me. They're seeking information, they're sharing knowledge with me, and they're looking for information and knowledge back. I have to process it, I have to think about it. It creates a lot of work. How much work? Well, Microsoft says that it takes us about 25 minutes to get refocused after we receive an email or a communication. Forbes says the average worker is going to spend about 2.5 hours a day on email. Now, I like email. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic that we can share information. But we have to be able to process that information faster. Speed matters. The ability to process information is critical. That's why the top skills, when you look at the list of what people expect to be most important in the 21st century, is dominated by critical thinking, problem solving, communication, the things that make us good at handling information overload. That's where we see the potential. But those are big tasks. Is everybody going to be ready for that? This is the question that many of us are facing as we think about our workforce. So the World Economic Forum projects that the biggest loser of jobs, the most disrupted industry will actually be at office jobs, not manufacturing. We're used to automation transforming manufacturing. But over the next several years, they predict actually by 2020, 4.8 million office jobs will be lost to automation. How is that possible? Because we can do things with technology that have never before been done. It used to be that only humans were really good at converting information into knowledge, that critical thing. But that's not the case anymore. Today, we have artificial intelligence that can write news articles. We have artificial intelligence that composes music. The first album was produced and composed by AI, was released last year. It sounds like any other pop music. AI can even create works of art. This is a transforming landscape. Where do our workers have to fit in? Well, the things that are driving it, it's no mystery. Mobile, internet, cloud technology, those, well, somewhere is my phone. Those little pocket computers we still call phones for some reason, are making access, it's a freebie. Processing power, big data, that huge data footprint that we're leaving on the earth as we go around with all this social media, changing attitudes, the rise of a middle class in emerging markets. Sounds familiar to the Renaissance, perhaps. These things are transforming the society in significant ways. It's what that's what the World Economic Forum is calling a perfect storm. It's creating conditions that are incredibly complex. Now, I want to be really clear. It sounds scary. It is kind of scary. But I'm not one to fearmonger. There is transformation coming. Workers are going to be challenged. We are going to have to upskill people. But in all of those examples I gave you of the newspapers and the artworks and everything else, a human was involved. A human essentially was using the artificial intelligence, the automation, as a tool. And just like any other tool, its value is only as good as the user. That's why we want to focus on these skills, because there are things that AI is very good at doing and things that it's not good at doing. Things it's not good at doing, things that are random. Things it's great at doing, things that are replicable. Look at the list of skills that we say are most important. Cognitive flexibility, negotiation, people management, critical thinking, the ability to collaborate, the ability to use those tools your AI colleagues are going to have to maximum effect. We can do that. We can leverage the power of technology to transform our world in a positive way, if we're ready for it. But we got to get ready for it. So one of the challenges we face is that the way that we teach and educate, our systems, they reflect a very old time, 100 years ago. This is a photo from, I think, Germany. Assembly line. right? We still have assembly lines, of course. But this was the heyday of it. There was this thinking, like if you could create, I think they're radios or whatever, if you could create radios in line, then couldn't you do office work in the same way? Let's see if this works. Nope. You could do office work in the same way. And if you could do office work in the same way, how about school? You ever see a classroom where kids sit in rows? Should remind you of this. That's on purpose. Because if you create a replicable system, it's easy to spread that information to get those results, just like it's easy to make components or parts over and over and over again. And you know what? It's really effective. This methodology actually works. In 1900, it's estimated that only 21% of the world's adults could read. Today, it's 85%. That's an incredible achievement. All of us should be incredibly proud of the fact that we live in a time where literacy has achieved this incredibly high rate. So those methods, those factory-style methods, they are effective. They do work, but they have a limit. They're really good at doing some things like teaching basic literacy and math, and they're not very good at teaching the higher order thinking skills that we need people to be good at. And that's because, well, no one's alike. Every person is unique. So when we aim for the middle, we educate none. And that's what those old models are about. We're going to create a bell curve. We're going to teach everybody the same way. We'll provide as much differentiation as we can, and that's it. And you educate none. Like when you aim for the middle, you hit no one. If we want people to be ready for the future, to work hand in hand with those AI colleagues, we've got to change the way we educate. We have to reinvent learning. But we can do it because we have a secret, something that I'm absolutely certain of, and that is people love to learn. People love to learn. We have an innate joy of learning. And if we can tap into that innate joy, we can begin to achieve incredible results. Because the fundamental question is, okay, great. We don't want to do it the old factory way, but at the same time, we still would like to see those literacy rates higher and higher and higher. Wouldn't we like to make sure everybody has a seat at the table? How do we make sure that everybody has an opportunity? How do we make sure no one is left out of the emerging economy? Well, we have to educate them in a way that makes sense and prepares them for it. And we can do that if we tap into what motivates and speaks to a person, because we're speaking to the thing that is true to them, their innate joy of learning. You've all experienced this, I promise you. You've all experienced the joy of learning. Maybe you've tried to master kicking a ball or something, right? You're a soccer fan, a football fan. Maybe I love to play the guitar. That's my hobby. Practice over and over and over again, and even when you're done, you want to practice more. Not because you're trying to fulfill the guidelines of the book, but because you're motivated to do it. You have a burning desire. You have something inside you that demands that you push and drive. The thing that you're experiencing is joy of learning. We've all experienced the joy of learning. And if we can create an educational and training and learning system that taps into that, we will be able to create the environment we need to make people successful to work in this new future. Now, I wish I could tell you that there was a magic pill that I can pass out and everybody will get it, and we'll all do it, or a magic wand. And the fact is, there isn't. But we know from learning science and research that there are techniques that we can use that does help us connect better with that purposeful learning, with the purpose of learning, to help us see ourselves in it. So I know I'm running short of time, so I'm going to give us our 3 tips. The first one is the learner has to see himself or herself in it. They have to be invested in the personal goal. You need to feel in control of your learning. That is a human piece of it. Why is it that going and kicking that ball over and over again is so interesting, or why playing the guitar over and over? It's not because somebody told me to. It's because I saw myself in it. I could imagine what I could do once I successfully mastered that, and then I wanted to do more. Learning resonates when we see ourselves in that journey. It's the difference in an extrinsic and an intrinsic motivator. So an extrinsic motivator is an external force, like fear of punishment, or I'm going to give you a reward. Traditional learning is filled with it. Money is it's like probably the king of all external motivators. You know what they found though? That even money, which is the king of external motivators, has limited power. What they found is actually it's only the promise of money that makes people work harder. Once you give them that money, the motivation goes away. That's because we're not tapping into the thing that matters. So in our business, in my line of work, I'll see this sometimes. Okay, you want to get your bonus, you need to finish this English curriculum. That's a lot of, I see I'm at 0. It's okay, I'm going long. That's a lot of motivation. And you know what? It works. You can get somebody to go and do things because you said, I'm not going to give you your money if you don't. It does work for a little bit of time and always just before the deadline, because what you've really achieved is compliance. What you've achieved is compliance. If you want people to change their attitude, you have to speak to the intrinsic motivator, which is true to all of us. You have to speak to the thing. If you don't learn English, you don't get your money. The idea is, if you get better at English, you'll be able to collaborate better. You'll be able to upskill. You'll be ready to work with your colleagues around the world. Things that speak to your ability to have a relationship, to be inspired, to be driven, to protect or support your family. That's intrinsic motivators. They're very powerful and they last. All right, second, measured progress. The learner has to be able to see incremental progress along the way. So they need to see where they're going, feel that they have a stake in it, and then they need to be able to see the steps along the way. I call it the climb a mountain. You know, when we give somebody a task that's too big, we shut down. Climb that mountain, good luck. If you want somebody to climb a mountain, there's only one way to do it, and that's one step at a time. So we have to break down the learning into small steps. Milestones that are close enough to be attainable so I can see it, but far enough away to be challenging. If they're too close and too easy, where's the intrinsic motivation and success? If they're too far away, why would I try? We have to find the balance. But we can do this. So one of the ways that we're doing it today is with things called like micro-learning. You know, where you break content into small chunks and people complete small chunks of information and they learn a concept. You complete a few small chunks of information, you get to a milestone. Now I can do this thing. I learned these things, these vocabulary words, now I can use them. I learned how to do this technique in cooking, and now I can make this dish. Small steps that equal to something grand. You do enough of those, guess what? You're at the top of the mountain. And then if you're really motivated, you keep going. Intrinsic motivation with little steps that make you feel successful. And the last one here, habits of success. We have to make sure that we're building systems that make people successful. And the best way to do that is a way that you probably have heard it, the 70-20-10 rule. 70% of the time for learning should be on the job, real application. There's nothing more purposeful and true than being able to do it on the job. Coaching and mentoring, a smaller subset, feedback, live feedback. Classroom time is the smallest. What does this look like in practice? You go and you study for 5 minutes, and then you go and you try and apply that concept on the job, and then you check in with a mentor or a coach, a boss, somebody that you trust, and he gives you feedback on how you're progressing. That's how it works. Because now you focus not on, I'm going to sit and hear all this stuff, but instead I'm focusing on applying it. So the simple example is learning how to cook. Right? You probably learned how to use the knife once. And then you spent years and years cutting, and you got better and better at it. That's on-the-job training. And then you made the dish, and maybe it wasn't so good, and you got feedback, like maybe I should do it differently this way, or, well, that was really good, I'm going to try it again. That's how it works. That's a practical example. But we can recreate that same experience in work because the innate joy of learning drives us. We are driven by that. And if we think about how this compares to the traditional methods, they're very different, right? I'm going to bring a group of people into a webinar or a room. They're going to sit down. They're going to listen to somebody or watch a presentation. And maybe it has relevance. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Then they're going to go away. They're not going to know. There's not going to be follow-up. No connection to the work. No purpose. Is it any wonder that does not work for most people. It's not a factory. People are individuals. So I want to thank you. I want to especially thank you for giving me extra time, which I just took because I'm greedy. But like I said, I am really passionate about learning. And the things that we talked about today are old. These are like ancient. Socrates, the Socratic method, which is still really popular, that guy lived a long time ago. And that's because the human mind, the way that we learn, it hasn't fundamentally changed. We're still the same creatures. The lessons that we learned in the past are applicable to today. We are living in a new renaissance. We are living in a time of change. The world is going to be different. But if we hold true to knowledge and learning and a commitment, we will succeed. Thank you.